Nollie spoke about back at home how the community there is very disconnected in the feeling that the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. What are your thoughts on how to promote digital literacy and responsible online behavior in light especially of the elections that are coming?
It's funny you mention it because I think about this all the time, and I've been approached by lots of big organizations who want to do things, and I say to them, you've just got to go and talk to people. You know, one big consulting firm got hold of me a couple of years ago and said, all of our clients want us to go and educate their staff. And I said, put me in a room with them and give me half an hour and I'll make sure they don't fuck up again. And they were like, oh, that's going to be very expensive, and can't we do it online? I said, no, it doesn't work like that. In my first year of university, I had to study poetry, and you had to go sit in a computer lab. The screens were still green screens. You got that orange glow afterwards, and you had to work out how. Nobody learns that stuff. You know, it just doesn't work. We are human beings. We have interaction with each other. So I've been thinking about these things for a long time. I've spent the last couple of years writing about how Google and Facebook are evil, how you can't trust them. The evidence about their malfeasance is manifold. Instagram and WhatsApp are the largest, quote, vast pedophile networks. Facebook knew, they used that phrase, competitive advantage. They knew from their own emails in these court cases the American government has brought, they knew how damaging Instagram was to young girls. They knew, they even said it, and they said, no, we can't, we'll lose our competitive advantage against TikTok. So the simplest, easiest way to solve this, the American legislation has something called Section 230. Michael Markovits is much more clued up on this than me. Name drop, he runs a media institute here at GIBS. And what Section 230 does is it absolves the technology platforms for what's posted on these platforms. You want to change the world, make Mark Zuckerberg responsible for all those neo-Nazi swine who post things. You know, you never see any like neo-Pol Pot, do you? You only see like neo-Nazi. Nazism is not defensible in any form, not least because so many of my ancestors were killed. But we have the system where you can be Facebook or Google making hundreds of billions of dollars every year and not be responsible for letting some right-wing, white supremacist arsehole with less education than, a doorknob talk about why he thinks Hitler was a good guy. Mm-hmm. So if you make the technology companies responsible, all of a sudden that will disappear. That's a pipe dream. What do we do in our own countries? Well, frankly, we do what Europe did. And my solution is take the EU's DMA and DSA, the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, cut and paste the text, add in a bit of Xhosa, do a find and replace for Europe with South Africa and implement that legislation next week. That's simply the biggest way. We need to be realistic in South Africa. It breaks my heart. I have a big Eastern European connection. I've been going there my whole life. Zukile is from Mount Frere. It kills me that there are people living in a village who don't know that, Cyril Ramaphosa, uses his couch for as a bank. Or even who he is. It's heartbreaking. This is a profound breakdown of a government's role. Our government can't even get rid of pit latrines, So what we need is actually some kind of concerted action, and it's an emergency. It's not just bad. My son will be 7 in this month. I've had the most fascinating conversations. I'm a bit of a late bloomer, even though I've been an uncle since I was 9 years old. How do you explain something to a young brain about apartheid? How do you explain why? So the goodies and their baddies and the really bad baddies are evil. Okay, then why? He says to me, all governments are evil. Why does he hear that? Because he hears me talking about, for the last 15 years, how the ANC has done so little for the actual people it set out to save. Well, how do you explain that to a young mind? So I'm like constantly thinking as a journalist. I'm a technology journalist. I have been for the last 20 years, but really I'm a news journalist on holiday writing about tech. It's been a long holiday. And my job is to explain really complex things in the simplest way possible. And the only people who are good at that generally are journalists. We don't traditionally have an agenda. I can look around this room and say everybody here doesn't vote Republican. I mean, I suppose what's the equivalent of Republican in South Africa? FF+. But we are clear, rational thinking people. That's why you're at a TEDx Johannesburg talk at GIBS about disinformation and misinformation and AI. Most people don't even know that. Most, 10-year-olds in South Africa can't read for meaning. The government doesn't give a fuck about legislation about whether Facebook's going to push misinformation. We need some kind of very concerted effort. I'm going to talk to you about this afterwards, Michael. We need to take the EU's legislation for ourselves and replicate it and get it going, because no one else is going to do the work. Finally, deepfake audio, I just did a podcast interview. It is bigger than you have any idea. The statistics you're quoting are truly profoundly scary. My mother's 95. I've taken over her bank accounts, mostly because I don't want any kind of manipulation that she doesn't know about. But crime as a service is a thing. Eugene Kaspersky told me himself maybe 5 years ago. These cyber criminal gangs, they've got medical aid, they've got leave forms. You go to them and you say you want this. You go to someone and you want to... the dark web is filled with the software. You can buy the software to scam, to phish, to do whatever. So what we really need in practical terms in South Africa is the EU's two landmark pieces of legislation, the MSA and the DSA, cut and paste and implement it, because our government doesn't care. Their agenda, I was explaining this to my son, the thing I learned about politicians, the politicians are only interested in their own agenda. If their agenda happens to align with the people voting for them, that's good luck to the people. But most people in power are only interested in their own agenda. And that's true of anyone in politics, in big business. I've been reading these horror stories about Boeing. You just look at Boeing is a regulated industry in America. It's the largest exporter in America. It's shipping planes where things pop out of the doors and fall out of the sky. Regulation is one thing. Implementation and enforcement is entirely different. And actually, as always, and we know this from South Africa, we know this. I grew up in apartheid South Africa. We know this. You can't rely on the government. That is my ethos. We have to do it ourselves. Civil society has to man up, or woman up, let's be honest, and get people to do this. The government's agenda is its own agenda. They're still fighting over whether coal's a clean energy.